Okay, you guys, so we're going to get started real quick on just blocking in our models. And as we discussed in class, really what I'm trying to do here is get you guys comfortable with establishing kind of broad stroke shapes and not so much worrying about detail, but just knowing how to start with basic primitives and really get everything kind of flowing. So off the bat, I launched ZBrush and I have my custom UI loaded. I also have a Z tool of an image plane that I'd like to use. So I'm going to go ahead and drag this out real quick. So this essentially is going to be the artwork that I'm going to use. I'm going to hit T, and we're in business with this guy. So let's go ahead and move this guy over to the side here. Now, to activate my transpose tool, I'm hitting W, and I'm going to go ahead and select that middle round white circle and just move this off to the side a little bit and perhaps even enlarge it. So I'll hit E to enlarge this. Let's kind of get this roughly in a good place, somewhere like that. And now we're going to append a polysphere, or in this case, if you don't have it already loaded in your subtool palette, you can double click here and it will bring it in, but you're going to lose one or the other. So if I want to go ahead and append back that image plane, since it's loaded up here, I'm going to say append. Select that image plane. And let's go ahead and move this guy over. Now, one thing you'll notice is that the texture may have disappeared. What I recommend doing there is a good chance I didn't select the right one. So here we have the one that actually has the image just applied. Let's move this over to the side. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and append that polysphere just to kind of get started with something. And there we go. Sweet. Now, it's really important to note that we want our geometry to remain centered. Okay, so I moved over the image, but I'm not so much moving over anything else. Okay, now one thing I want to do is kind of get this positioned in a way where I can really work off of this one part of the image here, like really make that the center point of it. So I'm going to move this over, and I'm also going to turn on, if I go under transform, I'm going to turn on, let me find that real quick. Right here where you see transparency, I'm going to turn that on. And what this is going to essentially allow me to do is really just kind of get this guy lined up really center. And I'm going to go ahead and scale this up as well, just so I have a really good starting point for this. Okay, that looks pretty good. Let's go to our move brush, and I'm going to go ahead and go select our sphere. And now everything went black because I still have that transparency mode off. So I'm going to go ahead and turn that off. And now we'll start shaping. So the first thing I'm going to use to shape, whenever I get started with any of this stuff, is basically my move brush. I want to make sure symmetry is turned on by hitting X. And let's go ahead and start dragging out just some basic form. In fact, I'm going to go pretty broad with this. And oops. Looks like I did something here that I didn't want to do. Let's go back here. Move this guy back. Okay, apologies there. And I'm just going to basically start kind of getting a general shape for this guy intact. Now, one thing I don't like that's happening is I want to basically take this geometry of this image plane and move it out back. So I'm going to really quick just move this back. So that way I can kind of see it a little bit better when I'm moving things around. Okay, so let's go to this guy And we're going to just really quick smooth this out. So what I basically did there is hold down Shift to smooth this geometry down. And now I'm going to go back and start pulling this guy. I just want to establish general shape. Nothing too crazy. Really start thinking about also like what type of form I may want from every angle. So if I'm thinking about just what's happening there on the side, I'd want to do something there. Now, one thing I could do, just to give me a little more point of reference here, is I could simply duplicate this subtool and rotate it over so that I have that context over there as well. So let's go ahead and do so. I'm going to take this image plane, duplicate it. Let's go ahead and snap to the top here. And I'm going to start rotating this guy around. So because it's hard to see it like this, you know, I kind of have to angle the camera in a way that I can see what I'm looking at, but at the same time, you know, it is a little difficult, it being a really single plane. But now I'm in a place where I can move this thing around. Let's bring this right to about there. Okay. And my goal is not necessarily to make it feel as though it's lined up perfectly. It's really just to have that visual context. Let me go back in and start shaping this once more. Notice I'm really doing my best to keep things as low res as possible. And if we don't like the way something's lined up here, I can go back over here. And let's just kind of get this a little more centered. All right, let's go back to this. So now what I'm going to do is duplicate this mesh, the sphere, that is. I'm going to move it up. So I'm going to drag out my transpose. I'm going to hold down Shift when I do so, so it locks it at that angle. And now hitting W for move, I'm going to hold down Shift and just slide this up. Okay, I'm holding down Shift to lock it to that axis. And now I'll scale it down and just move it into place. And now I'm going to go ahead and select my move tool and start essentially shaping this guy. I can hold down Shift at any time just to kind of do a really quick general smoothing of that shape. And my goal is just to take the provided points of this geometry and just really dictate it as much as I can into the shapes that I want. It's not going to be perfect, but we can really maximize just how much we're getting from it. Go back to this one, just kind of pull this up a little bit. Okay. So now let's go ahead and append one more polysphere here. I'm going to bring this guy up. Scale it down. Move it into place here. Let's have a little fun doing some shaping. This guy. Really simple. Now, some of you obviously have more complex characters and a little more ambitious designs. And that's totally fine. You know, it's still the same process of breaking down shapes, whether it's a simple character or not. Now what's going to happen here in just a second is once I get to the point where I've exhausted the amount of pushing and pulling that I could possibly do with these pieces of geometry, we're going to perform a function called Dynamesh, which is going to basically take our geometry and combine it into one. I tend not to do so until I really have things in a really good place. This might be a good time to do it. So I'm going to go ahead and select the top piece of geometry, and I'm going to combine it down. I want to essentially merge it down to everything underneath it. So with the merge down tool, or in this case I can go in my subtool palette to merge, I can hit merge down, say okay, do it again, say okay. And now I went from 3 separate pieces that I shaped into one. Now these are, however, all one shape, but they're not all merged into one continuous mesh. So in order to do that, I'm going to basically do a very basic function here in ZBrush, but a very powerful one. Under geometry, there's a nested menu called Dynamesh. Select that, and what we are going to do is we're going to Dynamesh this, which is essentially going to make it one uniform piece of geometry. So I'm going to say, okay, and you'll see that what happens is it actually turned everything into one piece of geometry, which I can now go and just kind of freely sculpt on. So I'm going to give it a general smooth right now. And actually, I think it was too heavy the way we did it, so I'm going to undo this. Let's set this resolution to something like 56. Say, okay, that's more reasonable. And now I'm going to smooth this down, but when I smooth it, I'm actually going to do a different type of smooth. I'm going to hold down Shift, and I'm going to click on the model, and then let go of Shift. And then it's kind of like a relax and smooth. But you'll notice that now we have one basic piece of geometry. And so now what I can do, essentially, is I can go in and just really start establishing a better shape for this guy, a more intricate shape. And if I want to see if I want to be able to see through this a little bit, one thing that we can do well, this isn't performing right here. This should be able to turn opacity off. Let's do a little bit of shaping here. And I'm just going to slowly pull out this tail. There's something there. And see what happened there is I didn't pull from the center, so I'm going to back up here real quick. I'm just going to pull this out. Bring it up. Now here's something really cool about Dynamesh, is that as you're doing this, and I'm really pushing and pulling, you know, a lot of these shapes, smoothing things as I work, I can continuously Dynamesh. So right now, you can see the product of this is I'm pushing these pull sources and stretching this geometry. If I go back to Dynamesh and go ahead and hit this one more time, redistributes everything. So you can continuously build on this and make things really, really, really easy to continue shaping. I'm just going to kind of round out the bottom here. Okay, so one thing I'd like to get is a little bit of that divot in there. So let's Let's actually pull some of this out. And I'm not necessarily a fan of like going in there and using image planes like to a T. I like to be a little more loose and organic with this thing, but I'm really trying to be keen on everything I can introduce here. Kind of move this around. I'm going to go into, I'm going to hide the back one here just so I can really see this guy in a different light. Flatten out this face a little bit. So you can see kind of slowly building up. Now I've been using move this whole time. I'm going to switch to clay buildup. You'll see that that kind of works as like a much different type of buildup of volume that I can introduce here. It gives me a nice way to be really additive with the form. Very cool. Okay. Now let's take this beak and really try to get something in place for this. So I'm going to go ahead and append another polysphere. So I'm going to select this, move this up. Let's go ahead and scale this down quite a bit. So we're more in the ballpark here. And let's start really trying to get this guy in place. Turn on that image plane we had back here. And I'm basically hiding any geometry that I don't need to see right now, just so I can work on general silhouette of this form. Because once I have something working, I'll start combining it into the bigger mesh. Let's take this form here and start building up around this one here. Before we do so, I'm actually going to add some more subdivisions to this, just so we can see it a little more clear. Start building up this volume here. Keeping things really, really low res for the time being. All right. Let's go back to this beak. And I really want to get like a sense of that lower lip in place. So looking at how that lip, at least the beak of it kind of looks, we're gonna try to develop some kind of an appealing shape here. Notice I'm straying a little bit from the art. Now the reason for that is because I don't want to keep myself confined just to these images. Like I want to really analyze this in every capacity that I can. I'm going to subdivide this by hitting Control D just to give myself a little more information. And let's really try to bring this beak back. So I'm really trying to be specific about the kind of shape I want to introduce here. So slowly smoothing, slowly kind of being additive with this. You can even subdivide one more time. I use damn standard a lot to kind of emphasize an edge, but I'll do the inverse effect. And what that essentially does is kind of really emphasize the crease of an edge in a nice way. Let's get that nostril, or whatever that is, in place, or at least implied. I'm going to select this guy here, and we're going to subdivide this a little bit higher. We're not subdivide, we're going to dynamesh it a little bit higher. That way we have more information there. Let's give it a general smooth. I could have just subdivided it, but I find that you gain a little more control over the resolution if you're treating it if you're controlling the resolution with Dynamesh. So I really want that sense of those cheeks to be there. I really like to trust my eye more than just constantly looking at the artwork. I find that having the artwork off to the side, at least for me, is more beneficial than keeping it as an image plane really locked off. Some really simple demonstrations so far. I'm using clay buildup to just be additive with information. Okay. Look at this guy from every angle. There's a few things we can try to do here just for some general appeal. These shapes. Create a little bit of separation there. Just trying to emphasize like some kind of rhythm to these shapes here, how they work with each other. Let's go ahead and get something else in place. How about an eye? So we're going to append another sphere. Gonna bring this down quite a bit. Let's move this up. And so I'm just going to get this eye, for the most part, positioned. Now looking at this eye, it's pretty, you know, it doesn't look like it's a super articulating type of eye. It's really just more a shape than anything else. So we'll focus on just getting that shape in place. Feels about right. Let's go back here and I'll just kind of maneuver this geometry. In addition to this. As you can see, it's really a combination of manipulating both things that I'm trying to do, so I can get the best result. All right. Now let's take this guy. I'm going to duplicate it. Just so we can mirror it over. Once I have it duplicated, I'm going to scrub down to this deformation menu. We're going to go ahead and mirror this on X. It's going to say that you can't do it as long as this mesh has subdivisions on it. So we need to go up here and delete the subdivision levels. We'll delete the lower ones in this case. And now we'll mirror that over. And now what we want to do is merge these. So the same way we did before, we're going to merge down. Say OK. So now this is one subtool for the eyes. And now we're simply going to hit X to make sure we have symmetry on. So now we can make adjustments to this as needed. And that's pretty cool that we can do that. OK. So now let's talk about color. One thing that might be a good idea to do right now is assign a different color. So I'm going to go ahead and select a different shader. It gets applied to everything by default. So if I wanted to just be applied to one thing, or at the least color attribute, with whatever brush I'm active in, like right now I have RGB turned on as well. Keeping RGB on, I'm going to select a white color. And down here I have a fill object button. I'm going to fill that. And that's going to assign white color to this. So now if I change this color, you'll notice everything is changing except for the one that I just assigned color to. Now, if I want to change the color of the beak, for example, I'm going to select the beak. I'm going to go ahead and hover my cursor over the color I want to color pick. If you hit C, it'll basically change that color in your swatch. And now if I want to make that assignment complete, I'll go ahead and hit Fill Object, so long as RGB is turned on for your brush. Fill Object. It's a different color. Let's try it one more time. Here, Fill Object. Oh, I know what's happening. So what happened there is my RGB intensity for the brush is set really low. So I'm going to crank that up to 100. And now hit Fill Object. And there you go. Okay, that was my fault. So let's go to these eyes. And we're just going to make them black. Fill Object. There we go. Starting to get somewhere with this, at least. Now, looking at the shape language of this, there are some things I want to really try to get reading a little bit better. One thing is that nice droop of that belly that you have there. So I'm going to try to just emphasize that a little bit more. Really keep that a nice, clean shape. And as I shape things like this, I'm always looking for lines, like just lines of interest, you know, a rhythm to the volumes is really a nice thing to try to think about. Okay. All right, let's think about these arms that he has. So very simple arm type shape. Let's append another polysphere. Now it comes in black because the color I have picked in my swatch is black. So let's set that to white. I'm going to use my transpose tool to get this guy in place. Here's a good tip. I can use my move transpose function to squash this. Which is kind of nice. You would think you would use scale for that, but it's easier to do with squash. So what I'm going to do here is just simply get this in place and really just thinking about the broad strokes of this at this point. we don't want to combine this just yet, but we do want to get it to have a good placement. Combination of move brush and a few other things that I'm using here like transpose, but really haven't used anything too fancy. All very basic stuff. Let's go ahead and turn the resolution up on this wing. One thing I do like about this little arm is the way they have it really flowing into the body, almost just accentuating the silhouette, but not really, not changing it really. Kind of like something like that from the front, like just a really simple. I'm going to take my pinch brush and just try to pinch this a little bit. Maybe that's too much. Okay. It feels good. So let's duplicate that. Remove the subdivision level so that I can mirror it. And now we're going to merge this down. So let's also think about what's happening with this tail for a second. I just want to go in and quickly give it some kind of definition where it's creasing. You know, it just makes sense to do so. So let's have a little fun with that. So you can quickly see like how simple and organic it is to take initial shapes in ZBrush and just really try to flesh them out. Let's think about the legs real quick, and then I'll call it a day with this. So let me go ahead and append one more shape here. So I'm going fairly far with this, but only because the design itself is really simple. As you can see, there's going to be much more complexity to the stuff that you guys are doing. But this really, hopefully, paints a picture of what it is to just really go in here and block in this information. So one thing I'm going to do right now is actually take this. I'm going to move it up because I just want to see it. I just want to see it somewhere that I can just evaluate the shape without so much worrying about it being behind my model. So I'm just going to trust my eye here. So let's just really quick get like a nice general shape working here. It feels pretty good in general. May want to go back to these wings. Make sure symmetry's on. I'm going to pull this up just a little bit. Turn up the subdivision levels on this. And you really want to just get these things working just right. This line of transition is really important as well, like just from a design standpoint, to try to really make that line feel nice and clean. Don't neglect it. Really be thoughtful with it. Okay, so we're going to take this one and duplicate it. Remove subdivisions and merge it down. Oops, you know what? I didn't mirror it, so let's duplicate it one more time. Mirror it, and now merge it down. There we go. Now let's turn on symmetry. And now what we're going to do is basically dynamesh the body into these legs. So in here in the subtool palette, in order to move things around, with the one selected, I can essentially grab this little kind of crooked arrow here, and if I click on it, it's just going to go ahead and move it up. So remember the rule of merging down. We want to make sure we select the top subtool, and then the one right underneath it is the one we're going to merge down onto. So I'm going to say merge down, say OK. Now it's combined, but it's not a continuous mesh. And when I go into my polyframe mode, you can see the different colors distinguish what's a separate group of geometry. So we're going to get rid of that in a second. I'm going to go ahead and dynamesh this together. And there we go. Now you can see that weld start to take place. Give this a general smoothing. It's pretty good. And now what I want to do, I'm going to take an H polish brush. This is a good brush to just kind of, I use it in a circular motion just to kind of really get some cleanup happening here. You can see that this shape came a little irregular. Probably should have took just a little more care of that. In general, I'll be a little additive with this stuff here. Smooth that out. And now for this crease, we can go ahead and work it back in a little bit. Just a little bit. We don't necessarily need it to be super strong crease. I'm going to use pinch to just go in there and emphasize it a little stronger. And if we want to, we can go ahead and also merge in the wings or the arms. I was kind of keeping them separate on purpose for now. But let's go ahead and do so. So we'll take this, merge it down. And you know what? I'm actually not going to combine those just yet. We'll do that a little bit later. So now just to spend a little bit of time on the feet, nothing too crazy. I think for the purpose of just a quick demonstration of this, hoping that's enough to go off for the time being at least. Make a little bit of adjustments on the face. So this would be representative of a very kind of quick sculpt of the character. Further refinements would definitely come in the next stage. But we'll reserve that for another recording. Okay, I'm going to keep it at this for right now, for the time being. And one thing I'll do as I go further with this, maybe I'll visit it in class with you guys, is I will have something that's completely finished as far as like the feet are concerned and any further refinements on the shapes. But I hope that was informative. Really, really simple as far as the process is concerned. Of course, it gets more involved depending on the complexity of your model. But if we really just work on just identifying the basic building blocks, basic shapes, that's really our goal. Whether it's simple, complicated, doesn't matter. Really identifying what are the simple shapes that are building this design and working those in slowly but surely. All right, I'm going to go ahead and stop this recording, and any questions, we'll talk in class. Thanks, guys.